Feel like everybody's watching you?
Spotlight here. There we go. Okay,
Are we ready now?
we are ready.
I'll call this meeting to order for the Broadwater County Commissioners and Bridger Brewing for the Broadwater County Wheatland Targeted Economic Development District. And with that, I guess I'll turn it over to you, Dave.
Yeah. You know, Dave, maybe for the benefit of Debbie, maybe just a little background on the TED and
Sure. Which is, I guess, relevant to kind of what brings me here today, anyway. So, nope, I'm with Bridger Brewing and Spanish Peaks Engineering and have worked on this utility district. We have a brew pub opened 10 years ago, 2013. So I come up on 8 years ago in Bozeman. With my two partners over on kind of campus, and it's grown, successful brand, successful beer, kind of award-winning food and beer, with the idea that it's not enough space to be able to do packaging and distribution and kind of grow our product line, that we'd look at doing a manufacturing facility down the road, and that started us looking at properties as we got priced out of Bozeman and really looking at a manufacturing facility. But honestly, as we kind of grew, we kind of looked at doing more of a bigger concept. We'd do some music and things in our parking lot and looked at a space where we could bring that branding element. The idea of trying to build a manufacturing facility, another pub, embrace a community, and have some music branding to that we would have the capacity to grow and to distribute regionally. I think there's not enough of our Montana products going outside. Montanas make good beer. But anyway, in that process, kind of took us over to, we started looking at getting out of Bozeman and then, loved the Three Forks community, and then even coming across the county line into Broadwater County. Really loved that intersection. Had talked a lot, even with Dean Fulford. Actually, he was the first person to kind of talk to us about a smaller piece of that intersection, and he loved it and what it did for his business and brand. And so we went out, but we wanted more space if we were going to be out there, and ultimately ended up kind of across the street with certainly grand hopes. Now we're three small business people. We opened our current brewery without the benefit of any banking or financing, because no one would loan us any money or even lease us a space. We spent for years in my garage before we could take over a space and sublease to a failed restaurant and be able to pay a premium to recoup his tenant build-out costs, and sublease to him. Did private investors because banks wouldn't do it, but we're still able to build a successful brand. We came out and really, part of the benefit of this larger 250 acres, we were tucked over by the free. So do you know where the location of our project is? So we had looked at some visibility along the freeway, doing some music and things, and so I'd met with the local business assistance group, who was going to be there to kind of support and help and find opportunities, and told them, down the road I'd love to have this commercial development make sense, and I would love to be able to have some control over our neighbors and create a community, and of course it helps bring businesses into our lunches, which are going to be slow, and everything we do someday. But we're going to get our brewery and pub open, and if that's ever just parking and camping, and that's what we'll do with. And he started this conversation towards the TED, and he said, well, we'd love to see that happen sooner rather than later. How can we make that happen sooner? And I said, well, we do not have those resources. We need to get this up and going and can do it. And he said, well, so that's he started steering us down. Okay, first looking at doing I told him we need water and sewer. That's ultimately held that intersection back forever. The location's great, the traffic's great, but minus that, and sewers are troubled there, particularly sewers are troubled there with everything. And we had looked at, as a civil engineering background, I was going to build a sewer thing big enough to be able to expand or grow to eventually service that commercial anyway. And so Brian said, well, what if we create that sooner and service this whole intersection? I said, if you want to do that, it's great. I'll just hook into your sewer system. That's an easier road for me. And that's kind of starts down the first step of creating a tax increment district, which he said, that can only be spent in there, and it's encouraged to grow jobs and growth. It's set up just for this. We can create that sewer infrastructure and run it all the way to whatever commercial lots we can do improvements. We can do whatever it takes to get these businesses and jobs in here sooner. So I'd love to do it. So that created a long process on the TED, and then and we've been kind of in the backseat a little with the utility district as well. We had looked at, okay, if we were going to do one to service that whole thing, doing a private district, and he said, well, this is how we prefer to set it up. We do a public district, or the county wasn't in one, but we'll do a public utility district. I told him I had run the numbers for a 20-year pro forma on, because I had plenty of people say, why are you giving up this price? You get money in perpetuity, and I had run the numbers on what that money looks like and said, well, it's a nonprofit regardless to get the rates you need, because I kind of work backwards the way I do on rates. So I looked at what Livingston and Belgrade, Bozeman, Helena, what are water sewer rates, and the Four Corners utility, what are these, and they're kind of all over the board, and I put them together and said, here is a utility rate, because if I have utility services but they're real expensive, then it doesn't grow the businesses, and ultimately I wanted businesses in there. And so when I worked back, and I put it slightly higher than, say, a city municipal one, and had this tax district help pay for all the stuff's paid for, it's still breaking even for the rates you want. Without that infrastructure or a lesser one, then the hookup fees go up, the rates go up and it's still nonprofit. And so I was like, I'm good with it. So we went through the process. I eventually talked about, because by the time we got to that conversation, had spent a lot of time and money looking at different sewer options, where they're going to be, doing soil tests, looking at grounds, comparing lagoon systems, settled on this MBR system, and had spent a fair amount of time and money on this, and had kind of asked them at some point, okay, well, if you're taking this over, do I get, is there any reimbursement for, and they said, well, there's a certain amount of look back, and as we got into it more, I was like, I was afraid even the perception of a conflict of interest. So I had him just take it over. He took over formation of because I had and got rid of mine, formation of the district, and I kind of deferred to him. We've worked with Nathan Billiou on creating, the financing for the district was intended to be this, he created it, a bank funding that was matched by an EDA grant. He spent 2 years telling me about the EDA grant. They're excited about it in Denver. But man, you got to jump through plenty of hoops, and it's time consuming and expensive. But I kind of deferred to that. Ultimately, he had to, part of the process is hand the district over to the users, and the state law, it has to be held by property owners in the district. At that point, nobody wanted to take that on. We had, Wheat, Montana, the new ownership was but then they didn't want to take on any liability there. They want to wait till it's open to hook in. So again, kind of found it shifting back over, which, great. I'll navigate through it. We formed the district, has to be made up by 2 people, and has to have a board. So I'm president of this public utility district, which, it's helpful as an engineer, and I can follow it, but obviously, it's a lot of time and effort. And then we had to get the EDA funds, and we had to go a lot of public notice and hire engineering firms just to create the preliminary engineering reports, economic studies. We had to go through a lot of hoops to get through the process to get the EDA grant. None of which, so they'll match reimbursement after they award it. So all that money ends up kind of being sunk, and of course the bank loan is contingent on receiving the EDA grant money as well as the USDA 90% guarantee on it, which doesn't happen until we get through all these engineering reports and processes. And to pay for those, Bridge Brewing loaned money to the district, and we got matching grants through Big Sky Trust funds, and have been getting through this process, which has been drawn out. Then they wanted us to tie into COVID, which we did, because we're looking at doing some food shared processes that will help support this ag supply chain, where we can have direct retail restaurants, we can have public pickup, and then basket delivery services with a combined produce. We've got a Bridger Farms we started to support our greens for our current place that we looked at expanding out there. Talked with the person doing a craft creamery and bottled milk deliveries, and with I think they call it Happy Meats, where he gets the locally raised meat cuts, and looked at doing a butcher. We process a lot of meats for our current restaurant and looked at doing it there, and start creating a locally sourced marketplace that supported restaurants and public through mailing and through pickup, so that would support our ag and farm. That as a person in the restaurant business, watch them get hammered when all of a sudden restaurants shut down, and nobody could understand why they couldn't pivot enough to get this food into other people's hands. And then along with that, we looked at working with this professor out of California on doing these adaptable warehouse and storage manufacturing places, and then studying national conglomerates on where they had supply chain breakdowns with the manufacturing, and where they needed warehouse spaces for larger distribution. And this intersection was a great fit for a lot of those. So we went through a lot of processes, and it pushed it. Then we finally went before the EDA, and then they rejected it in December, and decided they suddenly got a concern because my name was citing as the president of the utility district and as the business in there, and they said, well, this is a conflict of interest. You're getting enriched with these tax dollars. And I told them I don't want to have a utility district. I'd rather somebody else's and I hook up. But they said, well, your property. Anyway, ultimately penalized going down this route, which is frustrating. So we've, meanwhile, the other problem we've kind of run into a bit. So what pays for this utility district was intended to be tax increment from which was pledged by the board for this. Which then makes the bank payment on half of it, and then the grant kind of matched the other half. And then as you grow businesses into the district that hook up to these, it grows increment that helps make those payments. The first payment, the bank loan portion was calculated to be covered by our new business that was going in. So the tax increment from that could make the payments on approximately $1 million, and then the grant would do the others. And again, as we added businesses, it could pay for them to go there. But then it ran into our own problem with our financing on our structure, where they wanted to see the sewer district up and running to finance our project, but the bank didn't want to commit to financing the sewer district until there was a tax increment created. So we've been...
David, I did have a question. So is it going to be strictly just sewer, or is it going to be water and sewer?
It's going to be a water and sewer.
Okay.
And the water is a more complicated process at this.
Okay.
And I could touch on that real quick. We've got 3 approved exempt wells. We are looking at opening on a single well, which will service the brewery and the pub for a while. And if we go over to the rest area, we've looked at doing, actually they do their own well. But so it would run to ours to begin, and then could continue to extend as we worked on getting more water rights. If our business continues to grow, our businesses is set up to split into 2 different, so we've got another well that could separate the pub. And long term, if we never did anything other than exempt wells, then talk with the DNRC, and they consider every phase of a business park to be a separate use. We've got room to do separate individual wells. We would still, for efficiency purpose anyway, have a single district that would then construct them and manage them. So whether it's 10 wells and 10 separate systems managed by the same person, you can't connect them together with the exempt wells. That's the link. Now, meanwhile, we're working on a subdivision that's trying to get their final plat that's a mile to the west that has 190 acre feet, which would service the whole thing. They want to finalize their plat before they sell us. We've also talked to the DNRC on two options. One would be called a hazard water. So the idea is that gully that runs through us, when we dig our building, we're looking at berming that up to create a backed up stormwater pond. It's not a big drainage area, but all the snow and water runs down that. It's enough to capture several hundred acre feet of water, and if we can capture that water, the hazard water idea is you're capturing it when it's in the early spring, when that water is flooding people and a nuisance. You groundwater inject it, store it underwater, and you pull it back up for use. So we could have a net zero water use. Then it's a single water right that can service them all, and we can work with a single well. If the DNRC process of creating a new water right becomes onerous, they said we could also look at, because we're capturing in the spring when nobody has any water rights below us, then that water would theoretically end up in the reservoir at Toston or below, and we can buy the downstream water rights from that reservoir at that time, and we're just capturing it upstream. So we've got a few different routes of getting the water rights, but those will sort themselves out. We can't wait through that process to get our business open. So we're opening on exempt wells, and if none of that ever happens, it would be multiple exempt wells. But we are building this, try to build as efficiently as possible to create, again, to encourage businesses. The idea is to create a system that we have this the sewer system, the water, and this gray water concept. So the sewer system we're doing is an MBR system. It treats your level down to the cleanest, newest standards in the state, these A1 standards. They've got a couple of these systems for city municipals north of Helena in Craig and in Wolf Creek, where the Wolf Creek one discharges right into Prickly Pear, and the water they test comes out of there is cleaner than the well water they come up. So it treats everything out of it. The byproduct after it runs through the membrane is clean water and these bug compost. And there's a sludge press on it. These systems that operate in California places, they press out all the moisture in their sludge. So the sludge isn't human waste; it's bugs that are treating it. And they'll compress that over, and then nurseries pick it up and sell it as a fertilizer. So our product is clean water and fertilizer, which again we can use. We got a lot of land that we can fertilize, and we're looking at growing hops and doing some landscaping on it. But by being able to send the gray water back to the park, like the rest area, all those toilets can be just a reclaimed water, and then it treats it as a closed loop, so we're not consuming water. Gray water to all the services, and along with that gray water, because of the level we treat it to, we can use it for fire suppression. So that gray water trunk line will have a fire pump out of the pond, so that every individual doesn't have to have their own tank, their own cistern, and their own. They can have more of a city municipal system that has a gray water 4-inch line that comes in that they run all their sprinklers and stuff too. So it makes it, again, very affordable for businesses to be able to come in and get started and go to work. The location is outstanding for visibility, for access. If we can solve these other problems, that not only, and our goal is not only to do them for the big Walmarts and people who come in and can do those things, but to try to, we'd love to kind of grow and support our local businesses as best we can and help them grow. We've struggled with this, and we'd love to support others. I mean, if we can create a business park of our Montana businesses, that's what we'd love to do. And we have a bit of a labor pool because we're right next to Montana State Campus, if you're familiar with our brewery location. So we have a lot of people that don't want to leave, and we got to kind of kick them out, and a lot of people with skill sets, and we get to vet them for years. And if we're looking at a bike shop that's going to make sense out there, we'd love to have one of our students that builds bikes or a mechanical engineer that can build them in retail. And we have a staff member that builds bows to have an archery shop out there. And as we have industrious, passionate people that we can kind of vet through there, we'd love to have spaces for them to grow, not only in our business as we grow in our manufacturing and have career options for them that we're short on. We have more talented staff than we can give careers to, and we'd love to expand not only for us but to create this. And I understand it's, I'm an idealist on these, and there will be a certain amount of, other businesses you have to take in that complement those, that maybe some of the big boxes. We had a site selector 2 years ago that wanted to build a $200 million manufacturing facility out there for, I wouldn't say what, some sort of a power storage technology, a U.S. headquarters. He loved the corridor on it, and he wanted to be in the middle of the property, kind of away from the highway. you know what, and kind of match some of our ideals. Now, he was shovel ready on a $200 million manufacturing facility. He wanted room to build one right next to it. And those are those things where what that does to our tax increment, it allows us, that generates us, over $1 million or 2 years just in tax increment, which allows you to build this subdivision quicker, get more businesses in quicker. It gives us great resources for that emergency services, fire and health, ambulatory building. We've talked with Galton College about potentially moving out and creating some amenities, although that's cool. But a lot of these, we've run into the problem, Ben. They come in, they're real excited, but as we're delayed on the sewer, we can't do anything. And so we're missing some of those, and continue to miss them. But anyway, I think that's what brings us to this. So as this happened, and it has that opportunity of kind of shuttering everything, because I'm supposed to close on my construction loan as soon as I get my SBA here from that this month, and the bank's going to wonder where the hell we are in sewer. And I need to give them an answer that they don't now pause again on our project, because we continue this chicken and egg piece. So I am working on creating a submittal to the state to just do a little drain field, something small on ours. But meanwhile, in parallel, I don't want to slow down on this public utility district. We've got this momentum, so I've looked at other financing options to bring private sector financing into it through a private utility district, and I've got a few different ways, and I'm trying to push them all and see who finishes first on them. But by going with the private, I can get rid of a lot of these federal crap getting it going, and notices. I can get it open more efficiently, and then frankly, we can just sell it over to the public or to the county if they want it, or I can run it. It doesn't make any money. But that tax increment. So the tax increment was pledged to the public, Wheatland, water and sewer. So we needed to talk about a couple of these things here. Just wanted the conversation. One is through creating this bond financing element that I talked about. Can I get the USDA 90% guarantee on some other financing structure? And it could be taxable or tax exempt. These have to kind of go through the county, and there's some elements that the county has to do on those. See if they're open to that, and then look at, can we pledge that tax increment to the sewer infrastructure, not necessarily to a company. I know Brian's still trying to push on those bonds, but they pretty much said, don't ask again. So, and I can't wait on those. But I do have a couple of options, including. I guess I'm allowed to talk about it a little bit now, because he said he was making it public. For example, one of them, Barnard, is kind of moving the quickest. I'm sure you're familiar with Barnard Construction. Barnard?
I'm not.
Okay. Barnard Construction, they're a large, heavy civil contractor. They've family, and they've been in Bozeman for multiple generations, but they don't do much work in Montana because they're doing mostly 200 to 400 million large projects, large marine works, and they're set up in Bozeman, but they don't really work in Montana for those. They've kind of thrown out an idea of willingness to build it and finance it. Which they've looked at the possibility of creating a local smaller presence here on a smaller dirt work, and we can incentivize them through doing this work and any dirt work or other growth in there, and it can help them get theirs established. And this project's pretty small potatoes. As a matter of fact, I talked with their estimator this week. He was kind of annoyed to have to talk to me, but the boss said go for it. And I'm following up with him on Monday.
All right.
But that's, and then I have another person that had looked at. Had talked briefly before, our financing for our project, we tried these tax exempt bonds, and it just got all the way to the finish line on those, which was an onerous process, and the state was very excited. The governor had signed them and was going to need to extend them, and they'd never made it to the end. And then the underwriter, Doherty out of Minneapolis, couldn't sell the bonds. And part of it was some hesitancy that his banks got when they talked to Montana banks, and a bigger part was it went to market in March, right when COVID hit and banks were reeling. And so we spent months, and he ultimately couldn't get those done. We had to start over on an SBA structure that was an SBA, a bank, and the Montana Board of Investments participation, which is waiting to hear on, which was cheaper money and more money, so it could work. But halfway through that, then we did have a private group that through another local financial institution that kind of put us in touch with a private guy. Said this should have gone to private people, not banks, and found someone that manages two different funds with billions, tens of billions of dollars, both taxable and tax exempt, and was really interested in doing all the bonds, was going to do all 10 million on our project. So we told him we were going to wait and hear about this other piece first. But he's been checking in with us, and this SBA loan was supposed to be done in August and is still drawn out. But if we can package this together with a taxable or tax exempt options, a taxable options with the USDA guarantee, or a taxable, he can put that into their portfolios, or they sell them to banks. The guy also owns a number of banks, Fred something. Those might be options. They also wanted to know they may be willing to do the tax district if they do the whole project as well. So we may have to look at going back on the bonds or those. And so I'm kind of going to meet with, they wanted me to follow up in January and set up a time and fly down and meet with this guy. And again, I just wanted to start this dialogue with you guys and check in and see what my options were before I start having these conversations with people. And so some of these, Barnard did not want to have the land as collateral if he was doing it. I guess he's been burned. Plus, we can't give up the land as collateral; it's already tied up to our project. So I think the USDA guarantee helps him, along with there's some incentives, some buyouts when districts say buys that or through property sales or so. I am talking to, this is my third one was a developer looked at trying to incentivize expanding that district on beyond ours and try and do some residential stuff and get him to invest into the whole thing. But with any of these, and I'm not waiting on anybody anymore, and I've got some people pushing some and another, I need to have a confident answer to talk to Citizens Alliance Bank to keep mine. And I need to keep this moving forward because right now the system's designed and it's been in the DEQ. They have a few more questions. It should be approved and ready for us to start moving on it by the end of this month. And I want to keep that timeline. I know the rest area still wants to use it, and their timelines they need to have it up even sooner than us, which certainly helps us as well, and also gives us a motivated individual. And we've talked about them. If we just did enough of our sewer system, we always said that we had a 2 million and a 4 million version. The 2 million built all the treatment facilities in the building and started the main trunk lines far enough to get them to our building and brewery, which creates the first increment, which pays for all of it. And then if any other businesses come in, they create more increment, and we extend them. When we talked about getting a bigger matching grant and things, and we could do the 4 million version, gets us our water and sewer across the highway to the rest area, which feeds. We've got still a dozen different letters of interest. We can't get them under contract because we cannot create parcels because we don't have sewer services. So all we can get is letters of intent and have conversations, and those are only good for so long. But the 4 million version got us across the highway. The 2 million gets us here. I've talked with the rest area person and say, if I just do my 2 million, he'd still be interested in just running the sewer line. Forget the gray or the ones at his cost instead of having to hook up, because it still saves him. So there's a lot of iterations. It ultimately comes down to which package we could sell. And in a perfect world, if we can pair this development interest, whether it's a Barnard or others, with this district, then and the tax increment, what it does is it incentivizes that partnership to build that, just like we started to talk about this before. If the goal is to build that commercial park sooner, there's a tax increment that's paying for the sewer that's securing it. The faster we build businesses and get them in there, the faster that increment grows, the faster that piece gets paid off and their loan is secure, and it grows the other work they want to do out there. So by doing that private partnership, it creates an incentive to really accelerate that piece to get that increment going sooner. That's where we've come to today, and I wanted to again have these discussions and kind of get it on so nobody's surprised when it came to the other financing structure. I didn't get to. I believe in talking to people, and so they can answer them and they know what's coming before they actually see it. And so I wanted to have those conversations. Wanted to bring Nathan to talk about, and I'll let him get into some of these now. The idea there's the kind of the three things. There's that tax increment pledge, and whether we pledge it to just the infrastructure and not to a specific business, or do we add a pledge to the private? We created a headwaters utility district, and do we pledge it to that as well? What we do with pledging that increment, and then second is what it looks like to do the taxable or tax exempt bond, and what that means for the county or for their involvement in it, and then make sure what is or isn't on the table as I'm trying to get this thing financed here with one or more groups.
Do you want me to jump in here, or do you guys want to capture any thoughts?
Yeah, you guys want to jump into that more?
I guess probably maybe the discussion would be on the tax increment pledge portion, how that works as far as for pledging public funds to a private business.
Yes. So there is in the tax increment, the TED statute that defines the uses of tax increment, there is the ability to pledge funds for a number of different infrastructure and various other projects, including sewer projects. They do not need to be publicly owned, but that creates a complication that I'll get into in a second. But just like when Helena has various downtown urban renewal projects, and we're working on a project right now where their tax increment is building a new building for Dowell Engineering. It's an old dilapidated building, and blight was identified as one of the key things that this increment district is supposed to address. So the funds are going to this private entity. It doesn't pay for all of it. It pays about half the cost of a new building and destroy this broken down old one. So there's no in the law requirement for a public ownership. It's a public benefit analysis that that the TED district, when it was created, identified certain improvements that would be public benefits, and then after then, if you're going to use tax increment, the tax increment has to be going to finance one of these identified public benefits that was in the original TED creation document. So when you created the Wheatland TED, it identified infrastructure deficiencies, and then created the TED and then the tax increment for the purposes of addressing those deficiencies. So wastewater and drinking water for that matter, but wastewater was identified as an infrastructure deficiency in the Wheatland TED in the creation documents, in that engineering document that was incorporated into the creation. So financing for wastewater is contemplated, and it can be done regardless of whether it's it's a water and sewer district, which is how we've created it right now, or whether it's a private utility, which is how Four Corners started up. So the way the Four Corners started up, they started up as a sort of private utility, like this Headwaters utility, and then after they ramped up and more people developed, then they sold their system to the Four Corners Water and Sewer District, and I also work with them, and we've structured both that transition and then the transition from PSC regulated private entity to then going to a public water and sewer district, which is not PSC regulated. But so as far as just the ownership issue and the pledging, that's there's not an issue. The thing that makes an additional step for you guys, if the bonds that are issued to pay for this project are being issued to pay for an improvement project for a privately owned utility company, then the county becomes the issuer of the bond. So presently, the county has pledged the tax increment for the payment of the Wheatland Water and Sewer District bond. So work with the bond council, I'm engaged by the Wheatland Water and Sewer District. I would actually draft up the bond documents. Wheatland is the issuer. They actually are the ones that pass the bond resolution, ensure that the payments are being made on a regular basis, whether it's semi-annual, annual, monthly, depending on what the bond purchaser, however they structure the deal. So there's very little administrative overhead for the county. Under the structure with the resolution that you guys passed, just pledging the increment to the payment of this bond that a publicly owned entity will issue. With a private utility district, then the county would become the bond issuer. So the bond is only secured by tax increment. When we do these sort of tax increment pledge bonds, we just finished one in Polson. They're very clear, they're a non-recourse bond. So there's no way they can come after the county's general fund. There's no tax backing. It's not like a GO bond where you vote on it, and then if there's a delinquency, then there's a deficiency tax is levied against everyone in the county. That doesn't exist with a TIF bond. It's a limited recourse, TIF only recourse bond, and essentially the purchaser of the bond has to underwrite it. They have to look and say, what's the increment, what's the projected increment, and then they decide whether that's a risk they want to take or not.
So that's the security of the bond?
Yes, that's the security for the bond, is just the increment. So they wouldn't, now they could contract with David's organization if they wanted to get some more private security, that's fine. But as far as the county would be concerned, it would be a non-recourse debt or a limited recourse debt. They only have recourse against this increment. So that is the unique feature of these sort of things, and that's why there's usually it's a specialized market of purchasers that want to buy them, because there's these markets that are they're used to underwriting tax growth and projecting tax growth. But if the county issued this bond, the principal would go to pay for the construction of the water and sewer district. The increment would come to the county from the Department of Revenue when they assess the taxes, and then the county would be responsible for actually making the payments. So that would be the difference over the plan as it has been to date. Is now it would actually be a Broadwater County issued bond, and it would be your treasurer that's going through and making sure that the payment date on July 1 and January 1 is being made, rather than someone at the water and sewer district, because a bond secured by a TIF pledge has to be issued by a public entity. It can benefit a private entity, but it has to be issued by the public entity.
Now, not to interject here, just so for my clarity, because I've been kind of the one processing, making these payments, and what happens where the difference between the tax increment or when it's collected and when it's paid. I mean, ultimately, then if the bank or loan payment is more than the money that the county has, if they don't have any money in the bank because their increments run out, then we can still have, say, a relationship with the district that says, we write you checks to the county and then they write them to the bond. Or how does that work as far as securing that?
Yeah, so the underwriter, so how it works usually with the TIF bond is just if the bond purchaser, if there's not enough increment, you just essentially, you roll over any delinquencies and capitalize it. But they're usually pretty conservative in underwriting these. So I've never seen them go delinquent. I just know that's the process. I've had to explain it to people, but I've not actually seen someone miss a TIF payment go delinquent. But what they could do is they could work with you guys, or the private utility district, the purchaser of the bond, and say, as additional security, we want you guys to essentially,
Guarantee the note.
yeah, act as a guarantee.
So if they're short from the county, then we can write a check directly to them.
Yeah, you could agree to do that. That's not really the county's
Yep.
concern one way. The county wouldn't be the one, what we wouldn't ever want the
So the county-
situation being is you guys, the county would never want to sign up for an arrangement where they're hunting down private actors saying, hey, we've got debt collectors at the door, we need some money. But if you wanted to separately guarantee it and the bond purchaser might ask for that,
But as far as the county, they say, here's what's in the tax from the pledge, here's the payment, I'll make the payment. If it's not there, then the bond issuer
yes.
just knows that kind of rolls in.
And that gets very close to another financing structure you guys may or may not be familiar with, which we're not doing here because it doesn't involve a tax increment, but just an industrial development bond. We're just closing on one in 2 weeks for Gallatin County for a new addition for firefighting capacity for Bridger Aerospace, and that is a bond that Gallatin County has issued. They aren't paying anything on it, but they just assign the obligations to pay to the private company. And this would sort of be like that, but with the increment first, and then if the underwriter wanted to go to the private company and require a surety, that would be fine. It's just one step removed from an industrial development bond where the county makes the payments, but they assign their obligations to actually send in a check every 6 months to a private entity.
So can we do something where, say you have this bond,
Mhm.
and you say, okay, I'm gonna do this bond, amortize it at whatever terms, but we're gonna have a balloon payment in year 10, and the balloon payment is the responsibility of the district. And so if they are short, and it's kind of rolling in, at the end, I mean, there's got to be some sort of an end there that for the purchaser, and then at the end, the district then has to make the balloon payment, takes on that debt. I mean, can you do something like that?
Yes, so as far as securing it privately, anything in addition to the tax pledge, we're really just in the world of the free market at that point. Whatever an underwriter wants to be secured that you guys are willing to add as additional security is fine. The key thing is just that the bond documents we would draft would make very, very clear that the county bond is a limited recourse debt as to the county. You can't get anything from them other than the increment. And then to the extent they want to separately collateralize this debt in any way, secure the debt in any way, with you all, that is perfectly fine, but the bond documents would reflect that the county is in no way a guarantor on any of those payments. And in fact, I would probably use for that agreement the same sort of form agreement that I used when we did this $180 million bond issue by Gallatin County to the Bridger Aerospace folks, saying, it's about 10 pages of saying in 100 different ways that the county is not liable in any way, shape, or form, just the private entity is liable to pay these debts. So the market is used to those sort of arrangements. We would just essentially be using that as the backup. That's the security to pay.
No, I know that, and this is the question we get into constantly. There's this, as much as, we opened the first time, I got tired of everybody saying, where's your sweat equity? And this time, I've been tired of hearing about smoke and mirrors. So, and I get it. That happens to enough people. So the natural question I have is, okay, yeah, you're expecting all these businesses come in, and they're all talking about doing it. But what if nobody ever comes in 10 years? How do I get paid? And that's the question I get. And so, I put them together, projections kind of in what it looks like, and that's part of that piece where then, both for their security and certainly for ours, it incentivizes, I need to get those businesses in, I need to get that increment going to try to pay this debt. Otherwise, I got to come up with something in 10 years. So,
Right.
But the idea then, and also to structure them, is to, like any of these IDB bonds and things we're looking at. There's an amortized interest for 12 or 18 months to get it built, and then an interest only, and you're trying to, backload so you can get it open. But all that then, the idea then also is to amortize it out. Maybe it's a 15-year note with a balloon at 10, so you can take that short-term burden until you get these businesses up and the increment going. But all that leads to, having a balance at some manageable time. And I'd love to pick that time, as I say, throughout 10 years, so that we're also not going through this, just kind of keep extending it out through the district and eating up all that increment. There's other things we'd love to do within that, as far as building in the park and our, that emergency services building, and making sure that, we got this mechanism that we are, and our financing partners. So we've talked to a couple finance partners that get excited about financing all these elements in the project, and you incentivize them with this, and then by getting in this, they get their foot in these other pieces, and they're motivated to finance these other pieces because they all protect each other. And so I'd love to have, plan for success, but and incentivize that success and growth, which is what this TED's here to do, is to encourage that growth. But do it then in a way where, okay, in year 10, you pledge this increment. And is there ways we can make sure and say we're pledging this increment, but only to the extent of the principal and interest on this infrastructure. So if that increment is exceeding it, it can only be paying for the physical purchase, the cost of that infrastructure.
Yeah, and that's actually a good thing just to highlight. In fact, under the statute, you can only pledge increments to 125% of the debt service. So, so the county, right now, obviously, the increment is less than what the debt service would be, but as it grows, you free up that increment to the extent of 125%. You can do the 125% pledge because that gives you some buffer for delinquencies. But after that, it would be, as a matter of law, freed up for any other improvements to the extent it exceeds 125% of the debt service. So, so it'd be available. And the great thing would be once some of this development does get going, assuming it does, and if there could be a transition like the Four Corner style thing to public ownership of the wastewater system, you would then have more than 10 users. You qualify for SRF funding, RD funding, which is how the county and how towns and most public entities are funding their money, and that's just cheaper and longer term. But so, that's all down the road, and that could help with your balloon.
Oh, it does. And part of the other thing, I again, trying to, understand, whatever best intentions, you got to kind of plan for that worst. Is it normal, or can we start looking at, say at this year 10, or between years 5 and 10, or however we want to do it, then the county, the TED, however you want to put it, has a purchase option at an agreed upon price. Say you take cost plus 5% for each year or something, and so that you have an agreed price, so that you're not, having to kind of held hostage or something on these. And the county can decide at that point, because again, it's part of this smoke and mirrors piece. If in 20 years we do have 20 businesses, great. Now I feel much better about creating this public one, buying it. We can, again, borrow out against the TED, beyond the TED, and we can buy it because it's a known entity. And it's easier for them. While it's an unknown entity, okay, we'll create it. And then once it becomes a known, but let's have an agreed upon price. So that has to do with the cost of getting it open. So the county, everybody's secured out. I'm not interested in making money on a sewer district. I'd rather somebody else was doing this.
So here's a question, Nathan. The challenge we always have in government is there's always expenses before the tax revenue arrives. So can we structure this so that there's money, the tax increment has been collected before payments are due.
Yes,
You know what I'm saying?
yes, so,
So don't start out at a deficit right
yeah,
off the
the
bat.
deal that we did in Polson is we didn't have the first payment for 18 months. So that's how we structured it for them. They did some dock improvements. We did it as a pure TIF bond and first payment 18 months after close. So that's how I would recommend that we.
And if it helps, so it's, again, as I start having people looking at different private entities and they just say, hey, I just need you to show me how you're gonna pay this back. And so, I put together 10 years of a couple of what-if scenarios that you guys are welcome to, with some assumptions. And it does kind of assume, I've got the tax increment from ours that was calculated during this whole process, and the estimated tax from our business, which I don't assume shows up till year 2. But then it kind of runs that cash flow payment. It's the same thing. And basically it was 18 months, which is kind of what people talk about, capitalized interest, another 6 months after that of interest only, and then a 20-year amortization and a 10-year balloon payment. And what that looks like for a couple different scenarios. One is, again, assuming these businesses come in, and these, I've got a guess on the gallons per day per business. I started using Four Corners because I used theirs, and they had about 480 gallons per day on average business. Commercial's going to be lower. So there's some crapshoots estimates in here. I use 250. I've got estimated hookup fees kind of go in there to offset this. I've got all the operating costs for that MBR that came with the manufacturer, including replacement costs. So I run these over, and then administrations and operations costs, and then track the cash, because it does give us then a head start on that tax increment, as well as some hookup fees. And one of these has us doing the project all the way across the highway and growing this commercial development faster. And that one, long term is a much more secure one. And then I have because some of these financing ones I talked to, I said, okay, I want to, let's plan for $4 million. And especially if we're getting this USDA guarantee, let's maximize that. But I'm only going to draw $2 million to start with, because until I have, so I can build the structure, get it to mine. Once I have a committed person on the other end, then I'll run it to them, but I'll spend that money then. Mm-hmm. And so I ran a scenario where nobody ever joined in after us, except the rest area, because that person said, I'll run the sewer to it. So I didn't spend that money. He didn't have to pay a hookup fee, just Bridger Brewing. And kind of ran what that cash flow looks like and what that balloon payment looks like and what the estimated increment. So that's the other part. With each new business, I ran how much is that increment created. I did one scenario that assumes 50% of what our increment creates, and I did another one that assumed 30% of what our increment creates. Because I figured, those felt like kind of a conservative range. If we get one of those $200 million guys, God bless. But this helps you kind of get an idea of some of the cash flows, and you can kind of look at those. So.
Sure.
These are again all these are that 30% assumption here for that tax increment, and this is the one from ours, and this is everybody else, and this is the number of new businesses that come in each year, and it kind of tops out in year 8 or 10. Okay. Now the early ones, I think we got people committed a little sooner than that, but I don't know what that looks like, or how many, is it one person on 15 acres or 5 people on 15 acres? I don't know. And so take those all with a grain of salt, but this is what I tend to do. I try to be very conservative with, but I know most people assume you're being optimistic with it, and so, but we are, having done what we've done, we've had to be careful because we don't have deep pockets. But this is our rest area. This is their estimate of 3,000 gallons per day. My estimate comes closer to 6,000, but that's what they say.
Yeah.
As far as revenues from the sewer, this is ours that's calculated increment, and you can see then these are loan payments, so it doesn't start till the end of year 2. That's half of a year of interest only, and then you start to get principal interest. But this then is your running balance. And then this says, year 10 balloon, you're basically paying off, you would have an extra $245,000 over the payoff. So it would pay off in that period with this assumption. This is what I had to show my team. It's like, so between year 10 and 11, where we have no debt payment and no tax increment, then that district is, it made $20,000, $30,000. I mean, this is the one then scenario where I don't have any businesses in. It's just the brew pub with the rest area hooks up. And then at the year 10, I've got a balloon payment at year 10 of $1.5 million. Well, this tells me what my balloon payment. Here's supposed to be, well, this will be probably the same, 3.125, which can be made out of that recurring balance, but you may just pay that down as you go. This is one then that says if the increment's a little bigger, if it's 50% of my business, well, then you've got an extra $3 million, even after you pay it off in year 10. So those are all those kind of, but the idea is, and again, this is a guess on terms and rates. I plugged a 5% in 18 months, but it gives us cash to build up ahead. That then, most conservative version kind of works down, kind of dwindles away. But on this one, I'm only spending this money because this is my estimate to get it just to the brewery. This one, I'm spending that. Plus, I have another $600,000 expansion halfway through.
Get it across the road.
Yeah.
Okay.
Which
So-
I don't know if we'd have to make. It depends on how much businesses are coming in. And so there's a lot of guesses. Actually, here you go. Here's this too.
Yeah.
This is, these are all those costs that came out of the estimates we put together. So those are your costs on it. And this is, these are the same sheets you have. They're just smaller and higher.
Oh, gotcha.
But this here is where I told you where the rates come from.
Yep.
So this is where I built them 3 years ago, and they may be different now. So here's your Belgrade, Bozeman, Livingston, the PSC. This is what they charge as a base and per 1,000 gallons for water and for sewer. And assuming a 250 gallon per day, here's what your total bill would be to kind of compare them across.
Mm-hmm.
And this is kind of what the rates are built. So then these are our rates here and kind of how that compares. So.
Okay. All right, good. So, I guess what are your thoughts now for your streets and lighting? How's that going to be handled?
So, you know what, and when we had these conversations early here with Brian again, this was in order to expedite building out our commercial development. There was, the TED could be used to do roads, curbs, to help build those improvements. When we started putting together my numbers and projections, obviously that only to the extent that money exists. And so we had looked at, had kind of in our projections early, we had some phases of subdevelopment, assuming we're paying all of those in the early phases because that increment doesn't exist and what's there is going to the sewer. And then once the businesses are there and there's enough to pay the sewer, the next phases could be borrowed against, in theory. But those are all, that's that whole big unknown piece. And frankly, I've always been prioritizing to an extent the emergency services building. I mean, that's an important element to me. We're very community driven and oriented. That is what also grew our brand, we believe, when we opened up to begin with. Instead of traditional advertising, anything else, we take care of our staff, we support our community, we do nonprofits, we reach out to our community we're in, and that's how we believe in doing business, and that's been good business for us. As COVID's down, our community supported us, and so that is very much part of our brand and our philosophy, and that, as we're coming in, how do we support our community because they're supporting us, and that piece has been important. We've kind of got that land earmarked, and the idea of creating the sheriff and ambulatory, and I've looked at some of the preliminary drawings, looking at a community center and things. I mean, that is important to me. Again, there's that, like we've had all the way through, that chicken and egg piece. I mean, we need to get those businesses in and get that increment growing, and I understand that's the driving element of it. I'm also trying to get my water and services out past the district so I can get more immediate tax increment. I've looked at trying to get, but I've had to kind of dot that game where in order to get my grant, I need to justify getting across the highway. To get across the highway, or even to get to the community center, well, that's not creating jobs or a tax increment. But if I can get to the rest area, well, the rest area is not creating an increment either. Well, I got a person who wants to put in a refrigeration unit right next door to it. That counts. But then I can get to the businesses behind it, which aren't in the tax increment. I've been looking at trying to get some of my first businesses on the commercial. We've talked with the Murdochs, as well as on the far north end, what's the High Country Jerky, doing a big kind of a warehouse, a storefront, maybe moving some seasonings. He's still going to keep his manufacturing stuff, but he wants that distribution warehouse and a storefront there. And putting that on the far north corner so we can run the services out to him. That way we can get them to our property owner to the north. So if he wants to do commercial on the top, that gets us tax money into our schools and our community quicker, and to the county quicker. That's not a part of the increment. And so I am strategically motivated by those things a lot. So yeah, the curbs and roads, those would be, that's some gravy, and I get that one drives the other.
I guess I think about the first portion that has to happen. I mean, where you're planning to locate your brewery, I mean, you do have to have access to that, or you're just planning.
Oh, you
dirt
mean
roads
the
for
main
that?
road that comes in?
Yeah.
So we have, and some of these I try to double dip on within my own group. So our contractor is priced building at least a dirt, gravel, a smaller version of the road because he needs it to start building his building. We've tried to incorporate that into that, and that could be part of the TED piece. We've tried to incorporate it into the funding on that first phase of the utility district because we need the road to get to it. And how much of that we can do, how much of that we can get into the TED, and to the extent we are trying to maximize our matching grant funds, we want to keep as much of that in there. Right now, within, I don't believe that road is in the $4 million version that gets over to the building. It's not in the $2 million version. Okay. But I ultimately have to build the damn road. And it's kind of first up. And we had talked about trying to do some creative things with the counties to maximize our matching grant element. Like the bank will only loan so much. Can we build the road? And then do we do a land swap with building the road for the community center so we can count that towards our match? And I mean, there's creative ways we can try to get things done. So that's why that road's been more of a and some of the efforts to kind of work again with the community to kind of get us to where we are. I mean, we are not developers. We're not deep pockets.
Sure.
We are figuring this out as best we can, and we are ultimately conservative. We brought in a fourth partner between the three of us that opened them to get us a capital infusion. Kind of sold them the idea in order to help us get our land and get things under pocket and not be overextended with these problems. And so we've got a lot of equity in it. It's been a challenge because it ties up our cash and our expectations as it gets delayed from our existing business now, and that one is a brewery and a pub and a restaurant and is struggling, and all of our cash is tied up, which is the bigger animal. But we've got we have to be creative on how we can get these things done. But you're right, in order to all of this vision for what can be done in our community center and this commercial and this business, for any of that to happen, and I frustrate my team sometimes. They say, you know what, the brewery and the pub, we just need to focus on it. I get that. We need brewery, pub, and the sewer, and we could cut out the sewer on the other one, but then it kind of delays it indefinitely. And whatever we do on ours is kind of a sunk cost, and we just kind of circle the wagons and survive on those. The idea of the sewer system was to get those going sooner. Yes, it benefits our lunch, and for us, conservatively, we can sell lots if we need cash, because as you're starting up any business, there's a cash flow crunch. Great. So this big vision we have out there, it only works when we can get the sewer system and we can get our business open, because our business pays for the sewer system. And we're kind of been at that same crossroad for too long. But that's where we're kind of back at right now.
Okay.
And we have a lot of people excited. Nobody doubts, well, except our Montana banks. They're the only ones that seem to doubt that location. Everybody can't believe the location. Businesses, owners are like, well, you're on I-90, 287, great traffic, amazing location. Our Montana banks, unfortunately, just say, well, that's pretty far from Bozeman. That's all they'll say. So, well, a manufacturing facility, that's where you want to be. But that is what it is. You know, we've kind of been able to, you know, navigate that as best we can. But, I keep going off on.
No, you're fine, David. Yeah, I mean, I think that sort of the takeaway is you go and meet with these investor groups. I mean, part of the thing that's going to make this wastewater system happen is being able to use tax increment to pay for the construction. And so there's some options that he has before him that involve this being a privately owned utility, and there is the ability legally for the county to finance this with tax increment. Essentially what that would look like is amending the current resolution that pledged this tax increment to the Wheatland Water and Sewer District, and amending that resolution and pledging it to the payment of a bond that the county itself would be issuing. And so I think what David needs to know as he goes and meets with these groups is when he's putting sort of a menu of options for them to underwrite and consider on the table, is a Broadwater County tax increment bond on the table, right? So if he has a private utility district, is Broadwater County willing to consider being the actual bond issuer, and then collecting that tax increment for payment? So, you know, that's what I've tried to give a lot of explanation. That's kind of like the ask, right? That's what we need to know, is if that's part of the financing options he can present to investors.
Good, it helps me understand it better. That's as I'm trying to explain it, it's a little different even than I thought it was. So that's good. I think I have a better handle on it. But this is what I wanted to know. I'm supposed to follow up with, particularly the guy that does those big funds and owns a bunch of banks. I was supposed to follow up at the beginning of January, pick a time to go meet with him, but I wanted to meet with you guys first and kind of understand what it is I'm talking about and how it's going to get paid for. I mean, that's what they just say, well, I just need to know how it's going to get paid for. So I gave them what I gave you and said, here's kind of what it looks like. But let's go talk. So.
And when you're looking at all those numbers there, it's sort of the way that I've described these limited recourse bonds, whether it's a tax increment bond or whether it's, say, an RID special assessment bond. It's like the difference between a quitclaim deed and a warranty deed when you're selling a piece of property, right? And essentially, when you've got a tax increment bond or any kind of a limited recourse bond, it's like selling a property with quitclaim deed. You guys look, you figure out what you want, you can get your title policy, but we're not making any representation. So the bond purchasers will go through all of David's underwriting, all of his cash flow information, and what Broadwater County would be selling is this bond with this stream of revenues. You guys decide if it's a good deal or not. How secure are you? Like, it's just, this is all you get. The risk is then on them, versus a county GO bond, which is more like a warranty deed, where you need to go and do all of your own investigation, because ultimately it's secured by a deficiency tax on folks in the county. So as you're looking at that, if you have questions you want to know, you can ask David, but you can also know that the underwriters at the various bond purchasers are going through it with a fine-tooth comb, because they know that that's what they get, at least from the county. Again, if they want to make a separate security arrangement with David's team, they can, but from the county, that's what they get. So,
to that end, as I'm giving you these, keep in mind, you know, I'm tumbling all the way across. Right? So as far as what they're looking at then is loan payment and increment.
Right.
One, I guess this increment. The versus, you know, I've got everything total. So these would stay over on the district, and our hookups versus and operating things is kind of on our side here. So.
Okay.
As I understand it, so.
yeah. So, yeah. Anyway, I know it's kind of taken its shape in different ways, but.
Okay. And you have other avenues that you've talked about in case this doesn't happen, that you
so
pursue?
You know, what I've talked about doing with these private ones, this idea of the tax increment and the USDA 90% guarantee. are the things that secure it and make it attractive to people. Minus those, and that one, we're close on the USDA thing. My goodness, that just keeps pushing out. But that, if I understand, also has to come through the county.
So, yeah, well, that will be, so the RD guarantee, if the county decides to do this, the county can apply for that, but that's a guarantee is managed, that's all managed by rural development. So, it's Donna Andresi, I think, is the gal that manages this program for Steve Trundle over, and you guys might have done different RD borrowing for the county and worked with them, but they have a community facilities program where they will guarantee bonds up to 90%, and bond purchasers, they can't get both this guarantee and get it at a tax exempt rate, so they can decide. Whoever the investor is can decide whether they wanted tax exempt rates or whether they want the guarantee. But with a TIF bond, these guarantees are nice because there's just a little more uncertainty. It's not like there's a special assessment or water revenues or something that are guaranteed streams of income. So it's common for them to like to go search for, get this RD guarantee. But that would be, there's a process that RD would go through, and they would actually work with the bond purchaser. They would underwrite it, and then they would decide, okay, are we going to guarantee, so when we were working with Bank of Red Lodge potentially to finance if there was an EDA grant which fell apart, but RD worked directly with the bond purchaser. So I would expect ultimately the county would have to sign off on the form asking for the guarantee on the bonds, but as far as going through that underwriting process, the bond purchaser is actually going to be working with RD directly. So it's not something the county treasurer is going to have to sit down and do.
Okay.
But
Do you have
so to
time to
answer
do
question,
this?
with, and it sounds like the county underwriting doesn't really exist without their tax pledge, because that's how they're
Right.
making the payment on it. And then for us, minus that tax pledge, it would be, you know, at that point, you know, we'd do the small system in our building, and then, you know, kind of wait down the road. You know, if and that's that trade-off. If we could spend $4 million to build a system and pay for it by selling all the commercial property for $4 million, and that is, you know, I'd just keep it for camping and parking and not have the headache at that point. Or conceivably, with the public entity that the tax increment's already pledged to, I just lose some of the ability to provide those additional security or incentives for the buyer. Right now, they have the $1 million of extra equity in the grant, which provided some security. And without that, then I need to give them a security or an incentive return of some sort to kind of offset that. And that's what the private allows me to do. So there's a possibility of still trying to get it done on the grant. It's just you're asking, you just have less security for them. It's a trickier haul. And either way, the increments pledge, whether it's public or private, and if I would. And it would, with the public, it's going to be more expensive and time consuming to get open as well. If I can have my hands untied to get it open, and then once the debt increment is established, then it can become a public one and we sell it. If the concern is that they want it to be a public, then it would seem, you know, the safest, cleanest route is to build it. Once the increment's there, they know exactly whether you want it or not and what it is, and then do it. But that's why I was talking about, you know, we can set an agreed upon price tied to whatever it costs to build it. And maybe that's you know, if someone's, you know, cap whatever it could be, is that, you know, add 5% per year for the cost of loaning the money in there, or is that a 2% or whatever that is, or you say it's 5% a year, and then minus the sale price, and then you get back all the money that was paid towards principal. Or, I mean, we can structure any of those things. That gives you basically 10 years to say, this worked, it didn't. You don't have this, you're not taking on any risk. There's no smoke and mirrors. You can know exactly what you're borrowing against and whether you want it. You may look at it then and say, it's a loser anyway, or it's not a money maker, or it's even, or we want it or don't. Again, I don't need that piece. But we can, the most flexibility for me to get going kind of fast and efficiently and incentivize and you know what, I take on more that collateral piece is to go through the private one. The downside is, you know, again, all of a sudden you've got a private district that has some value that is held by someone else, and that's why I say I'm wide open to whatever we need to do to say, you know, let's bound that, and so we can take that risk away. There's got to be some upside that I can work with as far as kind of, again, you know, incentivizing the investors, but I don't need, you know, I am wide open. I'm trying to find the most efficient and upfront way forward through this process.
So do you have enough time to get that guarantee, you know?
We started that process forever ago. That should have been, this is all, everything seems to come to the same point.
Right.
That one was actually supposed to be done also, at the same time our US, the other one back in end of summer. All the notifications to the tribes that went out, and in case they want to kind of weigh in on these environmental stuff, once all those, they have a certain time limit to respond, and a lot of them don't really care. I mean, it has nothing to do with them, and so they don't respond, so they use up that entire window. Once that window was used up, we said, okay, we're ready to go. They said, oh, because of COVID, even though this whole notification started in the summer after that, they go, we have new language that we like to put in there, and it gives them more time, so they started the clock over again. And that clock actually expired right at the end of December, but now there's 2 more weeks that they do one other. All that process is supposed to end in the middle of January. In WWC Engineering, they're kind of managing that piece. I was just talking to Jeremy about it on the way over, and he said they should have all that in place by the end of this month.
So RD's close. He just have a bunch
Everything's
of-
been close, but just never quite there.
Yeah.
So yes, I do think that piece is coming together, and we've talked with Donna, and they've been excited to do it. Like a lot of people, they all make it sound like a quicker, cleaner thing. Oh yeah, we're going to do it. And then the banks say, okay, I need it official. Sign here. Well, in order to sign here, you know, we have to do this and that. But yes, that part, it sounds like it's very close. Then if we can, it cleans up the bond process, whether it's through a bond payment, whether it's through, and it sounds like, you know, the one that's gaining the most traction and moving the quickest would be the Barnard. Now, to me, the downside of Barnard, they're motivated. They've got a crew they can pull over and do it and build it, and they'll carry the financing, and it's a small piece. And so I think they'd be more than happy to kind of, whatever's not paid, roll in, and they just kind of have a mechanism. They kind of believe in what this thing's doing. They're incentivized to have a launch for their local one. The downside to me of that is they aren't necessarily the most efficient at doing it. I think they can do it, so we may pay a premium on getting it constructed. I'd rather get a cheaper bid on getting it constructed and pull that financing piece over to the guy that Fred with his multiple billion-dollar taxable and tax-exempt funds. Talking with his representative through D.A. Davidson, he was saying, you know, that utility one, he'd probably just sell to one of his banks. That'd be cleaner. Anyway, if I can get that, that separates it, and then I can bid to a number of people. And then maybe then at that point, we still get Barnard to do it, because I'd love to have them involved. I'd love to grow a Montana business and a local presence of it, and grow that construction and give them a presence. I think that'd be great. But if I have a different financing option, if he comes in and says, you know, your $4 million project's going to cost you $5 million, I could say, well, this guy can do it for $3.5 million. Love to have you do it, but I'm not paying a premium. Those are, I have more room with the private one to get all those things done. But the other benefit I learned yesterday of going private is now and I don't have it in there. I didn't even realize, it didn't occur to me here, is it then becomes a taxable entity. It will create tax increment, which will then go into paying it. And that'll be part of that decision now in 10 years. The county's like, well, I want to buy it to make it a public one, or they may say, no, I like the taxes I'm getting from it. The TED's about done. It just becomes more piece. It becomes more of a known element when you make a business decision on it at that point. So.
Okay, I don't know. You guys have any more questions? No. I think we probably had about all we can take anyway.
Not the process.
The fire hose. Yeah.
Yeah.
What are the next steps to then look like? And my goal is to again talk to you guys. If I'm sure there's a board and a process and a public one that I don't want you guys to know and not be surprised by anything. Is this something that they go through an official board, or do we need to have, say, a finance one that says, okay, I'm ready to do this bond, and the bond is specific towards a person? Can they have a general one, or do we have to kind of wait till we have somebody?
I think what we need to do is we need to figure out, get actual investors that are going to put offers on the table, and we need to know, do they want to buy a Wheatland Water and Sewer District bond that's issued by the Water and Sewer District, that is and secured in the way that we had been talking about, but they'll go the whole amount with no EDA grant, or do they want to go private and how do they want to underwrite?
So the next is to have a package on the table that we put before the commission.
Right.
Which makes sense.
So we want to go get, I think the next step would be to get some options, but what it doesn't make any sense is for David to go spend a lot of time having them saying, hey, do you want to do this or this? He spends a lot of time ramping up. Here is the pricing and the package that would include a Broadwater County issued TIF bond. Broadwater County's not interested in issuing. So I think that's part of the goal today would be just to, obviously you guys can't vote on or approve anything. A, 'cause it's not noticed, and B, there's nothing on the table to approve.
Right.
But it would, if the county is interested, at least in hearing what the pricing proposal would be for this private utility and with a county-issued bond, then David can know what's worth his time to go and market that option. If the county is not interested in that, then he knows, okay, I've got to focus to the extent we're doing a tax increment TIF bond, I've got to focus on this Wheatland utility district. And so I guess the question is, how many options can he put on the menu for his investors without wasting people's time?
Okay. Yeah, I think we definitely have to have something to look at.
Yeah.
So,
Okay.
yep.
All right. And so the sense is though that it's at least something you guys would be interested in considering if you could get some offers on the table.
Yep.
Is there anything else where you're hoping to?
No, I mean, it's essentially, you hit it on the head there, is I'm gonna, if I'm gonna go out and meet and talk about, and I don't wanna get filled an idea and say, this is what I'd be interested in doing, and then pick a course, because I think I'd love to look at these and one gains momentum. I'd love to push a couple, like I say, so I can get the best value for that, the district. But, I can't be, their time is, I'm crippled a little on time right now because of the last hour of this having to pick the EDA grant piece.
Yeah, that kind of put us all into a little bit of a
It is, because all my financials and my narrative and everything I've done on my project is tied to that. So I need to be able to move quick. And if I'm going down a road, and so I may tell them, you know what, Barnard, these guys want to buy the bond. I can bid it with a bunch of people. this is a structure that works, and then if I go down that road and it does not, then, and they may say, well, forget it, or, the other one that I started looking and paused on a little, be trying to, expand beyond it. Like I say, I'd have to sell all that property and spend all that money to do the sewer, and that just doesn't make sense. Would have to be to expand, start looking at trying to acquire properties around me, start to bring in a developer, and I've had some of those very preliminary, but the timeline of that is problematic. But that would be one as far as without any. I'm trying to do it all kind of private, or and again, I don't think my team will buy that. They're already annoyed. Why aren't we just building our brewery? That was the plan. And I get it.
Yeah, for sure. So I guess, Nathan, would you be available if we had some questions? I mean, I guess he kind of works for you, so.
Yeah, no, again, I am always again the
You're okay
most
with that?
transparent. You guys can talk direct. You can loop me
Yeah,
in. You
and
can CC,
and same with
whatever.
you, David.
Yeah, call me.
Okay.
Feel free, any of you,
Okay.
or to clarify things with Nathan.
Okay.
And I may wonder. The other person who made one, and so if we start having questions, maybe it ultimately goes through Nathan with whether it's Barnard, whether it's the D.A. Davidson working with this person as far as bonding and structures. I mean, they're going to ask those, but they may well check in and say, "Is this something you guys have heard of? You're open." They may do their own diligence. So, and I don't have any problem with anybody talking about anything. Barnard, I wasn't supposed to talk about for a little while. They checked in this week and said we're officially calling subs and getting it out, and asked if we're ready because people are going to know. And I'm
Yep.
like, all right, well, if
Okay.
you're letting people know, I can let people know.
All right.
Thank you.
Thanks, you guys, for coming down and spending some time
No,
with
thanks for getting everybody together and
Yep.
kind of getting this out on the table. Thanks, Nathan, for coming
Yeah,
on.
not a problem. It's good just to, some of these things just best to sit down and do in person rather than a
Yes.
series of emails or phone calls
Yeah.
or break up Zoom calls.
I appreciate the continued education. My guys, have taken the lead on financial stuff in our group, and they for the last couple of years have said, "Oh, Dave, he's the money guy," and I'm like, "I'm not a money guy. I'm our money guy, but I'm not a money guy." And I finally had to sit and think, I've had 2 years of dealing with banks and industrial development bonds and SBA processes, and I got to have at least 2 years of the equivalent of 2 years of college case, so maybe I am a money guy.
Yes,
I'm an engineer. I
you can open up your own private equity business.
Yeah. No, I think it's like the kid with the scar in the closet. It's that I don't want to do with it ever again. So.
You want to get back to making money by brewing beer, huh?
Beer. Before I thought it was going to be simple. I was phasing out engineering and just going to go make beer. It seemed like a simpler process than going through a lot of the permits and reviews and county planners and planners, and you get whether it's stream restoration permits and the Corps of Engineers and I'm like, I don't want to deal with any of that. Let's make beer. It's going to be so much easier.
And here you are.
Well, it was good meeting
Nice
you
to meet
guys.
you.
Thanks, guys.
Travel
Thank you
safe.
very much.
Thank you.
We will adjourn at 3:29.